It was the summer of 1975, and Amityville was as boring as it always had been, except for that house, the house where it happened, the murders. Something unspoken hung in the air. You could feel it when you walked through the streets, like the whole town was holding its breath, waiting, and at the center of it all was that house. 112 Ocean Avenue. Everyone knew about the murders, even if no one wanted to talk about them. 6 people, an entire family, gunned down in the middle of the night by one of their own. The house had been empty ever since, but it was not forgotten. Every now and then, someone would mention it in passing, their voice dropping to a whisper, like they were afraid the house might hear. That is what it felt like the house was listening. I was not sure why Jim and I had become so fixated on it. Maybe it was because we were bored, teenagers with nothing better to do during the long, hot summer. Or maybe it was something more. Maybe the house had already started pulling us in, even before we realized it. "Come on, Billy," Jim said, nudging me with his elbow. We were sitting on the curb outside his house, the sun starting to dip below the trees. "You're not chickening out, are you?" I rolled my eyes. "I'm not chickening out. I just don't see why we have to do it at night." Jim gave me a sly grin. "Because that's when it's supposed to be haunted, right? That's when all the weird stuff happens." I wanted to argue, but the truth was that I was curious. I had been since the night it happened. The papers said the guy who killed his family had claimed voices told him to do it, but no one believed him. The house had stood empty for months, but no one in town seemed eager to see it sold. No one went near it, except us. Jim leaned back on his hands, staring up at the sky. "Look, the house has been empty for a while now. It's not like anything's going to happen. We will go in, check it out, and leave. No big deal." "And what if we get caught?" I asked, but even as I said it, I knew Jim did not care. "By who? The house is empty. No one is around at night. Besides, we will go through the back door. It is unlocked. Trust me." I sighed. "All right, fine. Midnight?" Jim's grin widened. "Midnight it is." The night was warm, the kind of sticky summer heat that clung to your skin even after the sun went down. My heart was already pounding as we made our way down the quiet streets toward Ocean Avenue. The town was asleep. The only sound was the soft hum of crickets and the occasional rustle of leaves in the trees. Every now and then I thought I heard something behind us, like footsteps, but when I turned around there was nothing, just an empty walkway. I could not shake the feeling that we were somehow not alone. Jim walked beside me, his flashlight swinging lazily in his hand, as if this was just another adventure, like we were sneaking into the abandoned train yard or the old elementary school. But this was different. This was real. And then we arrived. There it was, 112 Ocean Avenue. It still even had the sign at the front of the house that read, "High Hopes." The house loomed in front of us, big and dark. The house on 112 Ocean Avenue stood on the quiet street, its presence unnervingly still. It was a large, Dutch colonial-style home, the kind of place that once would have seemed charming with its sloping roof and distinct gambrel lines. The infamous windows, 2 large ones on the 3rd floor, gave the house its eerie reputation, especially in the years that followed. They almost looked like eyes, glaring out at the world, watching and waiting. A single streetlight cast its weak glow over the driveway, but it seemed to stop short of the house, as if even the light refused to touch it. Although it was a warm summer night, a cold shiver ran down my spine. "You ready?" Jim asked, his voice low. I nodded, even though my stomach was in knots. "Yeah, let's do this." We walked around the side of the house, our footsteps crunching on the gravel driveway. Back then, the backyard had a pool which was covered, and seemed somewhat creepy just sitting there, so still and unused. Jim led the way to the back door, and just like he said, it was unlocked. He pushed it open, and the door let out a long, slow creak, like the house was groaning awake after a long sleep. The air inside was stale, musty, like the house had been sealed off from the world for too long. I hesitated for a second, feeling the weight of the place pressing down on me, but Jim stepped inside without a second thought. I followed, my flashlight cutting through the darkness as we made our way into the kitchen. It looked like any other house. There were dishes still in the sink, a chair pulled out from the table like someone had just been sitting there. I could not help but imagine the family who lived there, going about their business, completely unaware of what was coming for them that night. "This is kind of creepy," Jim whispered, his voice bouncing off the walls and pulling me away from my thoughts. I nodded. "Yeah." But as we moved through the first floor, nothing really stood out. It was just a house, a normal house, dusty and quiet, nothing like the haunted nightmare I had been expecting. Maybe this was not such a bad idea after all, I thought to myself. "See, told you it is no big deal," Jim said, flashing me a grin. "Just an old house. People are scared of it because of what happened, but it's not like the place is cursed or anything." "Yeah," I muttered, even though I did not feel as confident as Jim did. But there was still something off about this house. The air was too still, too heavy, like the house was holding its breath. We wandered through the living room, the dining room, poking our heads into the empty spaces. It all looked normal, thinking that maybe we had just finished our little exploration. We can now leave with nothing to show for it except a good story to tell. But then we reached the stairs. "Let's check out the bedrooms," Jim said, his voice quieter now. He was not as cocky as he had been when we first arrived, and I could tell the house was starting to get to him too. I hesitated at the bottom of the staircase. "I don't know, Jim. Maybe we should just call it a night." Jim gave me a look. "Come on, we've come this far. We are not leaving without seeing the rooms. That is where it all happened, right? That's the whole reason we're here." He was right, but something in my gut was telling me to turn around and leave. But I ignored it, following him up the stairs. Each step creaked under our weight, and the higher we went, the colder the air became. By the time we reached the second floor, I could see my breath in front of me. We stopped in front of the first door, both of us hesitating. Jim glanced at me, his flashlight beam shaking slightly. I could tell that he was feeling uneasy even though he was playing it cool and not wanting to admit it. "You ready?" he asked me. I swallowed hard. "Yeah." Honestly, in this moment, I do not know what we were both expecting, or thinking for that matter. Jim pushed the door open, and I immediately wished we had not. The room was wrong. It was like time had stopped the moment the family died. The room was untouched, and the bed was still in its place with the mattress exposed. And then there were the stains on the mattress itself. Dark, dried blood on the sheets. My stomach churned, and I had to look away. Jim let out a gasp. "Damn, that's—" I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. The room felt like it was suffocating me, like the air was too thick to breathe. I could almost hear the gunshots. I could almost feel what it must have been like that night. We did not stay long in that room, just long enough for the terror to sink in, and at this point, we should have left. But we did not. Instead, we moved to the next room, and the next. It was all the same. Another bedroom, another bed, another set of stains, dark and terrible, the same heavy, suffocating air, the same feeling of wrongness pressing down on me, like we were trespassing on something sacred. We moved in silence, both of us too scared to speak, both of us pretending we were not scared at all. Finally, we reached the last room, the one with the eyes. I stopped in the doorway, my heart pounding in my chest. I did not want to go in, but Jim was already pushing the door open, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. "Come on," he said, stepping inside. "It's just a room." But it was not just a room. As soon as I stepped inside, I felt it. Something was wrong. The air was heavier here, darker. My skin prickled and my vision blurred. I staggered, my flashlight slipping from my hand and clattering to the floor. "Billy?" Jim's voice sounded distant, like he was a million miles away. I tried to answer, but my voice was gone. My legs buckled beneath me, and everything went black. When I woke up, I was not in the house anymore. I was back home, in my house. It was night, and it was dark, and it was storming outside, and everything just felt off. I somehow knew my family was asleep in each of their bedrooms, like everything was normal. But it was not. I knew it was not. I stood up, and that is when I saw it. The rifle in my hands, cold and heavy. I did not remember picking it up, but there it was, like it had always been there. I tried to drop it, but my hands would not let the rifle go. They moved on their own, and before I knew it, I was walking out my room and towards the bedroom where my family lay, the gun heavy in my grip. And that is when I heard the voice, deep and raspy, crawling into my head. "Kill them." "No," I whispered, but the word felt empty. I could not stop myself. I moved through the house, my feet dragging me forward. I reached my parents' bedroom. My mom, my dad lay peacefully asleep and unaware. I raised the rifle. I pulled the trigger and the gun went off, a deafening sound that echoed through the house. Blood sprayed across the walls, across me, and then another shot and another. The sound filled my ears, drowning out everything else. I killed them, all of them. I woke up on the floor back in the Ocean Avenue house, gasping for air. My heart was pounding in my chest, my body drenched in sweat. Jim was kneeling beside me, shaking me. "Billy, Billy, you all right?" His voice was tight with fear. I blinked, disoriented. The gun, the blood, it had all felt so real. But now it was gone. I was back in the room, back in 112 Ocean Avenue. The darkness pressed in around us, thicker than before. "I think we need to go," I whispered, my voice shaking. Jim did not argue. "Yeah, let's get out of here." We did not waste any time. Jim helped me up, and we ran down the stairs, out the back door, and into the night. Neither of us stopped running until we were halfway down the street. I did not look back, but I could feel the house watching us. I could feel its eyes on me. A few months later, we heard the news. A new family was moving in. Jim and I exchanged a look, but we did not say anything. We did not have to. We both went past by 112 Ocean Avenue once, before the family moved in. The house stood there silent and still, and in the upstairs window, in the eyes of the house, I could have sworn I saw something staring back at me, something dark, something waiting. "Did you see that, Jim?" I asked. "Yeah, let's get out of here," Jim replied. We walked away from the house. We both knew that the house was not done. Not yet.